It started, as most heartbreaks do, with a promise. Not a spoken one, but a whisper of a future so bright, it felt like my eyes had finally adjusted to the sun after years in shadow. My name is Elara, and for too long, I had believed I found my anchor, my unwavering constant in a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable. I met Leo when I was still navigating the tricky waters of freelance graphic design, still carrying the phantom ache of a past relationship that had left me wary, guarded. But also, undeniably, yearning for a connection that truly saw me. Then, Leo arrived. He didn't just walk into my life, he flowed, like a perfectly composed melody, all effortless charm and disarming charisma, with a smile that could melt glaciers and eyes that seemed to hold endless depths of understanding. He wasn't merely handsome, he was a force, an undeniable magnet. Our first encounter wasn't some grand, dramatic movie scene. It was quiet, intimate, amid the low hum of a mutual friend's art exhibition. I was lost in a painting, tracing the lines of unspoken emotion, when his voice, smooth as aged whiskey, broke through my reverie. "That one always gets me," he said, standing beside me, close enough for the subtle scent of clean woodsy cologne. "It's like looking into a kaleidoscope of internal chaos." I turned, startled, to find him leaning casually against the wall, a glint of amusement in his eyes. No cheesy pickup lines, no overt flirtation. Just genuine engagement. He was an app developer, he explained, consumed by a passion project, something revolutionary. He spoke with such conviction, such quiet intensity, that I found myself utterly captivated. We talked for what felt like hours, the buzzing gallery fading into background noise, until our friend Mia practically had to pry us apart. By night's end, he had my number, and a lingering warmth had settled in my chest, a feeling I hadn't known in years. He felt like home, a lighthouse beam cutting through the storm-tossed wreckage of my past. Foolish, perhaps, to feel so much so soon, but with Leo, it felt different. It felt terrifyingly, undeniably right. The early days were a dizzying, exhilarating blur of discovery. We spent countless evenings curled on my sofa, dissecting obscure films, sharing childhood anecdotes, sketching out impossible dreams for the future. His app's vision was intoxicating. He painted vivid pictures, describing lines of code transforming into something tangible, beautiful, world-changing. He spoke of innovation, disruption, impact, and I, stable in my design work, found myself drawn into his world, eager to support our dreams. He confided his struggles, endless late nights, the tightrope walk of a burgeoning startup, lost investors. My heart ached for him. He was chasing a noble pursuit, and I, ever the nurturer, wanted to lift him up. So, when he first hesitantly mentioned a small loan for an urgent server bill, promising immediate repayment from a looming angel investor, I didn't hesitate. A few $100s, easily covered by a recent freelance payout. He thanked me profusely, his eyes filled with what looked like profound relief. "You're my anchor, Elara," he'd murmur, pulling me into a tight embrace. I melted, convinced my small sacrifice was an investment in our shared future. He made me feel truly seen, validated my feelings, celebrated my tiny victories. He remembered the small details, left handwritten notes on my pillow, "You are loved." My walls, painstakingly built after my last breakup, crumbled with surprising ease. I was falling, deeply, irrevocably. It was terrifying, exhilarating. This, I believed, was forever. The blip began subtly, a faint crack in the perfect signal. Leo's grand vision, his app, seemed to demand more and more, or so he claimed. Late nights stretched into early mornings, occasional frustrations mutated into constant stress. The initial excitement in his voice when he spoke of his project gave way to a weary, defeated tone. He'd come to my apartment, shoulders slumped, utterly drained. Another setback, he'd sigh, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. "Server costs are crippling." Lost another investor. My heart twisted. He was pursuing a dream, and the startup world was brutal. My natural instinct was to support, to uplift. So when he first hesitantly mentioned a small loan for an urgent server bill, promising repayment as soon as his angel investor came through, I didn't hesitate. It was a few $100s, nothing major, easily covered by a recent freelance payout. He thanked me profusely, eyes brimming with what I mistook for genuine gratitude. "You're my anchor, Elara," he'd murmur, pulling me into a tight embrace, and I'd melt, reassured that my small sacrifice was building our future, his success, which felt like our success. This wasn't just about money, it was about belief, about partnership. I wanted him to fly, and I would be the wind beneath his wings. The requests became more frequent and subtly larger. Always a temporary hiccup, a minor cash flow issue, a crucial investment that couldn't wait. A new, more powerful laptop for development, a specialized software subscription, rent for a co-working space that would foster creativity. Each request came wrapped in a carefully calibrated blend of genuine distress and unwavering conviction in his ultimate success. "This is for us, Elara," he'd often say, his eyes holding mine with sincere intensity. "This is building our empire." My savings, meticulously built for years, became a desolate wasteland. My once comfortable freelance income morphed into a desperate race to keep up with his escalating demands. I took on extra projects, working late into the night, sacrificing weekends, the exhaustion a dull ache behind my eyes. My friends, bless their perceptive hearts, started to voice gentle concerns. "Is Leo really pulling his weight?" Mia asked one afternoon over coffee, her brow furrowed. "He always seems to be about to make it big, but never quite does." "And you look exhausted, E." I'd bristle, fiercely defensive. "He's under immense pressure, Mia. This is how startups work. It'll all pay off, you'll see." I painted Leo as a misunderstood genius on the cusp of revolution. He subtly, almost imperceptibly, started to isolate me from these negative voices, suggesting they didn't really understand the entrepreneurial journey, or that their skepticism was contagious. I believed him. It was easier than confronting the uncomfortable truth. The idea that someone who claimed to love me so ferociously could be anything but honest felt unthinkable. I trusted him implicitly, and that trust, I was beginning to realize, was a bottomless well from which he drew without hesitation, slowly, steadily, emptying me out. The cracks were forming, hairline fractures invisible to the casual observer, compromising the entire structure. I just hadn't seen them yet, blinded by love and a fierce desire to believe. Love, they say, is blind. I was willfully, catastrophically, economically blind. The financial bleeding, initially a trickle, had become a steady gush. My emergency fund, once a source of comfort, was now a barren landscape. My freelance income, once a secure stream, felt like a desperate sprint to keep up with the ever-increasing demands of Leo's startup. Every conversation about money was a tightrope walk over broken glass. He'd masterfully shift the narrative, making me feel guilty for even bringing it up. "Are you saying you don't believe in me, Elara?" he'd ask, his voice tinged with hurt, his eyes wide and innocent. "Do you think I'm just playing around? This is our future, baby. It's a temporary sacrifice. You're questioning us." His words were a perfectly crafted emotional weapon, designed to short-circuit any rational thought. And it worked. Every time I'd back down, apologize, reassure him of my unwavering faith. I'd convince myself my concerns were petty, that I was small-minded, that true love meant boundless support, even when it hurt. I took on more and more projects, burning the candle at both ends, fueled by caffeine and a dwindling hope that his big breakthrough was truly just around the corner. I started to resent my clients, my work, the endless cycle of creating until my fingers cramped and my eyes burned. But I couldn't stop. How could I? Leo needed me. We needed this. His breakthrough was always tantalizingly close: a new funding round, a major partnership, a revolutionary feature. He'd come home from supposed meetings, buzzing with an almost manic energy, recounting fantastical scenarios of venture capitalists clamoring for a piece of his genius. I'd listen, exhausted but hopeful, picturing a future where we were finally stable, finally free. I was losing myself, piece by agonizing piece, and didn't even realize it was happening. The constant financial strain was just one facet of the erosion. The emotional toll was far more insidious. I became a nervous wreck, constantly treading lightly around Leo, terrified of triggering one of his stressed moods. A misplaced comment, a minor criticism, even a casual question about his progress, could set him off. He'd withdraw, become distant, or lash out with sharp, cutting remarks disguised as honesty. "You're so sensitive, Elara," he'd say with a dismissive wave after I voiced hurt. "Can't you take a joke? You're reading too much into things." Or, "I never said that, you must be remembering it wrong. You know how your memory can be." Gaslighting, a term I only later understood, was his preferred weapon. He'd distort reality, invalidate my feelings, make me doubt my own sanity. I found myself second-guessing everything: my memories, my perceptions, my instincts. Was I too needy? Too demanding? Was I truly the overly sensitive, pessimistic person he sometimes painted me to be? My self-esteem, once robust, crumbled under the relentless onslaught. I stopped expressing opinions freely, afraid of causing a ripple. I internalized his criticisms, convinced if I could just be more understanding, more supportive, less negative, everything would be fine. The vibrant, confident Elara I once knew faded, replaced by a shadow, constantly anxious, seeking his approval, desperate to keep the peace. I wore his moods like a second skin, my emotional landscape dictated entirely by his. The joy I once felt in my work, in my hobbies, even in simple moments of quiet reflection, was replaced by a dull ache of exhaustion and a pervasive inadequacy. I felt like a vessel, slowly being drained, yet still pouring myself into him, believing if I just gave more, loved harder, understood his genius better, everything would snap back into place. The truth, however, was I was being hollowed out, meticulously, deliberately, until there was almost nothing left but a shell, clinging desperately to the illusion of a love that was, in reality, a meticulously crafted deception. To the world, we were a fairy tale. Behind closed doors, it was a slow-motion car crash I couldn't steer away from. On social media, our curated image was picture-perfect. Photos of us laughing, holding hands, looking into each other's eyes with profound adoration. Captions gushed about soulmates, dream chasers, unconditional love. Friends and family would comment, "You two are couple goals," and a part of me would cling to those affirmations, desperately trying to convince myself that what they saw was the true reality. Leo was a master performer. In public, he was the attentive, charming boyfriend, always ready with a witty remark or a loving gesture. He'd tell stories about my artistic brilliance, about how supportive I was of his vision, making me sound like a saint, even as I was secretly crumbling under the pressure of keeping us afloat. At social gatherings, he'd effortlessly command attention, regaling everyone with tales of his app's impending success, his eyes alight with a manufactured enthusiasm that was utterly convincing. He'd often touch my arm or my back possessively, a subtle claim that felt comforting at the time, but now, in hindsight, feels like a territorial marker. I remember one particularly jarring evening at a dinner party hosted by an old college friend. I had, in a moment of vulnerability, confided in this friend about some financial stress and my growing fatigue. Of course, Leo found a way to spin it. That night, he was particularly on form, charismatic and funny, captivating the entire table with his anecdotes. He even subtly, almost imperceptibly, wove in a story about the challenges of an artist's temperament, making a joke about how sensitive I could be when faced with tough realities. He looked at me with a wink that I, at the time, interpreted as playful affection, but now I see as a cruel wink of complicity, an inside joke at my expense. My friend, who knew my true struggles, shot me a sympathetic glance, but I forced a smile, playing along with the charade. That night, as we walked home, I felt a familiar flicker of doubt. Was he subtly undermining me? But then he squeezed my hand. "You were wonderful tonight, Elara," he said, his voice soft. "I'm so lucky to have you. You just shine." And just like that, the doubt receded, drowned out by his manufactured affection and my desperate need to believe him. It was a cycle, the subtle digs, the gaslighting, the quiet undermining, followed by an outpouring of charm and affection that served to reset the clock, to reinforce the illusion that everything was fine, that we were fine. And I, like a moth to a flame, kept returning to his warmth, oblivious to the fact that it was slowly, steadily, consuming me. The perfect couple, indeed. A perfect lie. It felt like a sunrise after an endless night, a promise that all our sacrifices were finally about to pay off. Leo burst through the door one evening, not with his usual weary sigh, but with an almost manic energy, his eyes practically sparkling. "Elara, baby, it's happening," he exclaimed, sweeping me into a dizzying hug. "I just got off the phone with the VC firm. They love the new demo. They're ready to move forward. Term sheet by the end of the month." My breath caught. This wasn't just another vague promise, this felt different, tangible. He showed me a snippet of an email, a calendar invite for a final review meeting with a prestigious-sounding firm. My heart soared. All those late nights, all those drained savings, all those anxieties, finally justified. This was it. The turning point. We celebrated like we hadn't in months, splurging on a fancy bottle of wine, ordering takeout. He spoke of hiring a team, moving into a proper office, finally being able to take me on that dream trip to Italy. He even mentioned a bigger apartment, a place where we could truly build our home, our future, our family. The word family echoed, a sweet, resonant chime. I held a secret of my own, a significant achievement that had been a quiet act of rebellion against Leo's financial black hole, a hopeful step towards securing my future. My latest large freelance project had paid off massively. Instead of immediately pouring it into Leo's needs, I had, for the first time, used a substantial portion to pay down my student loan debt, something that had always weighed heavily. It was a quiet victory, a small reclaiming of financial agency, and it felt empowering. Now, with Leo's news, it felt even more significant. I imagined telling him, not as a challenge, but as a celebratory announcement, a joint step forward. "Look, we both worked for this," I'd say, "now we're truly on solid ground." I envisioned his proud smile, his genuine happiness for my financial independence, seeing it as a shared triumph. The thought made my chest swell with a renewed sense of hope and love. This was us, finally, building something real, together. The darkness of the past few months seemed to lift, replaced by a radiant glow of possibility. I believed, with every fiber of my being, that our stormy patch was over, and the sunny skies of our true future lay ahead. The air left my lungs, the world spun, and the untouched birthday cake mocked me from the center of the table. Happy 29th birthday to me. I had wanted something low-key, a quiet dinner with our closest friends at that cozy Italian restaurant we loved, the one with the checkered tablecloths and the comforting scent of garlic and basil. I'd chosen it for its familiarity, its warmth, a safe space to share my news about the student loans. Leo had seemed excited, promising to make it special. I arrived first with Mia and Liam, securing our table, a nervous flutter of anticipation in my stomach. The restaurant buzzed with happy chatter. But my focus was entirely on the door, waiting. He was late, of course. Not just a few minutes, but a solid 30, then 45. My friends exchanged worried glances, but I brushed it off, making excuses for him. When he finally strode in, he didn't apologize for his tardiness. Instead, he radiated an unsettling confidence, an almost dismissive air. He barely met my eyes as he greeted me with a quick peck on the cheek, then went around the table, slapping backs and shaking hands, looking entirely too pleased with himself. His eyes seemed to glitter with a strange triumph, and a cold knot formed in my stomach. I tried to push it down, telling myself it was just nerves about his big deal. The dinner began, and I tried to steer the conversation towards lighter topics, to simply enjoy the moment. But Leo kept interjecting, his voice loud, almost performative. He talked about vision, scaling, disruption, using all the buzzwords. He was grandstanding, performing for an invisible audience. I caught Mia's eye. Her expression was a mix of concern and thinly veiled annoyance. I cleared my throat, trying to get his attention, my heart pounding with the genuine, tangible victory I wanted to share. "Hey, Leo," I started, a hopeful smile on my face. "I actually had some amazing news I wanted to share tonight too." He cut me off, not unkindly, but with a dismissive wave. "Not now, Elara," he chuckled, turning back to Liam. "This is important. You wouldn't believe the projections. We're talking millions, Liam. Millions." My smile faltered. My friend shifted uncomfortably. A wave of ice washed over me, a chilling premonition. Then, he took a deep breath, puffed out his chest, and turned back to the entire table, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "Actually," he announced, his voice booming over the restaurant's chatter, effectively silencing our small group, "I have an announcement to make." My heart hammered. Was he proposing? Announcing the deal was sealed, and thanking me publicly? A flicker of irrational hope. But then he locked eyes with me, and the charming mask slipped, just for a split second, revealing something cold, almost cruel. "Elara," he began, his voice suddenly devoid of its usual warmth, sounding bored, "this isn't working out." The words didn't just hang in the air, they choked it, stealing all the oxygen from the room. My friends gasped, a collective intake of breath. I stared at him, my mind refusing to process what I had just heard. What are you talking about?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He shrugged, a casual, indifferent gesture that ripped through me like a jagged knife. "Look, Elara, I'm just not feeling it anymore. You're a bit much. A bit negative. And frankly, I need someone who truly understands my vision, someone who can keep up. Someone who doesn't constantly bring down the energy with all these problems." He gestured vaguely at me, as if I were a stain on the tablecloth. He said it so calmly, so detachedly, in front of everyone, Mia, Liam, our other friends who had come to celebrate my birthday. The humiliation was a hot, searing wave, washing over me, making my cheeks burn with a fire I thought would consume me. I felt every eye in the restaurant, even those from other tables, turned towards our mortifying spectacle. My vision blurred, tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not now." I looked at Mia, whose face was a mask of shock and fury. Liam had his jaw clenched, his knuckles wide on the table. "You're doing this, now?" Mia hissed, her voice low and dangerous. Leo barely spared her a glance. "It's my truth, Mia. Elara deserves honesty. And frankly, this conversation has been coming for a while. She just doesn't seem to get it." He stood up, adjusted his jacket, and without another word, without even a backward glance, he walked away. He left me sitting there, utterly decimated, surrounded by my stunned friends and an untouched birthday cake. The air was thick with the scent of betrayal, the metallic tang of tears I refused to shed. My 29th birthday. The day I had planned to share a victory, turned into the day I was publicly, brutally, discarded. My world, built on his lies and my blind trust, had just shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Every memory became a dagger, twisting deeper with each revisit, every shared laugh now a cruel, mocking joke. I was drowning, utterly adrift, and I didn't even know how to swim anymore. The immediate days after the public execution of my relationship were a hazy, unbearable blur of raw grief and suffocating shame. I locked myself in my apartment, the silence amplifying the echo of his cruel words. The birthday cake, still in its box in my fridge, was a grotesque monument to my humiliation. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from Mia and Liam offering comfort, demanding to come over, but I couldn't face anyone. How could I explain? How could I articulate the depth of the deception, the years I had poured into a man who had casually, publicly, torn me down? The financial burden, the emotional manipulation, it all felt too vast, too humiliating to confess. So I offered vague explanations about irreconcilable differences, clinging to the last shreds of dignity, even as I felt utterly stripped bare. The public nature of the breakup festered. I imagined people whispering, judging, wondering what I had done to deserve such a public dismissal. The carefully curated social media facade we had built crumbled overnight, and Leo, of course, was swift to replace it with a new, shinier version of his life. Within days, his profile picture changed, a professional headshot, impossibly confident. His feed was suddenly brimming with posts about new beginnings, exciting ventures, and shedding dead weight. Each post was a fresh wound, a reminder of how easily he had moved on, how utterly disposable I had been. He hadn't just broken up with me, he had erased me. I spent hours staring at my ceiling, replaying every moment, every conversation, every subtle glance. Each memory, once cherished, was now tainted, seen through the bitter lens of betrayal. The small, dismissive remarks he used to make, the way he'd invalidate my feelings, the times he'd conveniently forget promises, they all clicked into place, forming a horrifying mosaic of manipulation. The red flags I had so expertly rationalized away now waved furiously, screaming the truth I had been too blind, too trusting, too in love to see. I remembered friends' hesitant questions, their subtle warnings, the way Mia's eyes would narrow when Leo spoke. My fierce defense of him now felt like a desperate act of self-deception. I had been so convinced of his genius, his struggles, his eventual triumph, that I had become an unwitting accomplice in my own downfall. The self-blame was suffocating. How could I have been so foolish? So naive? How could I have given so much, believed so deeply, in someone so utterly undeserving? The grief was compounded by a profound sense of idiocy. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was humiliated, ashamed, and utterly lost. I felt like a gullible child who had fallen for the oldest trick in the book. The world, which had felt so vibrant and full with him by my side, now seemed muted, colorless, devoid of meaning. I was drowning in a sea of my own regret, a shipwrecked survivor clutching at the flotsam of a shattered past, with no idea how to find my way back to shore. The Elara who believed in true love and unwavering support was gone, replaced by a cynical, shell-shocked woman who wondered if she would ever trust anyone again, let alone herself. It was just a whisper, a fleeting image, but something clicked. And that click shattered what little remained of my peace, replacing it with a chilling clarity. About 2 weeks after the public execution of my relationship, I was slowly, painfully, trying to re-enter the world. Mia had finally dragged me out for coffee, insisting on sunshine and conversation. We were sitting at a small cafe near my old office, the one with the perpetually steaming espresso machine, when I saw her. A familiar face, though I couldn't quite place her. She was walking by, laughing brightly, her arm linked with a man who was unmistakably Leo. Not just Leo, but my Leo, the charming, magnetic version, even more polished than I remembered, dressed in a sharp suit I'd never seen before, far too expensive for his supposed struggling startup budget. The woman, however, was the clincher. She was stunning, impeccably dressed, and looked vaguely familiar. Then it hit me. Her face, her expensive handbag, the way she carried herself, she was Olivia Vance, a prominent venture capitalist, known for her sharp mind and even sharper investments. She was exactly the kind of person Leo had always claimed he was trying to impress. But they weren't having a business lunch, they were holding hands, gazing at each other with an intimacy that screamed romantic entanglement, not potential investor. My breath hitched. The coffee cup trembled in my hand, sloshing over the rim. Mia followed my gaze, her eyes widening in disbelief. "No way," she whispered, her voice tight with anger. "Is that?" I didn't need her to finish the sentence. My mind, still reeling from the breakup, tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was a new business partner? A mentor? But the way their fingers intertwined, the easy, comfortable lean of his head towards hers as she whispered something in his ear, it was undeniably intimate. And then, as they passed by, Leo laughed, a bright, clear sound that grated on my nerves. His laugh was filled with genuine joy, a stark contrast to the weary, stressed sighs I had grown accustomed to. He looked carefree, unburdened. The sight of him, so happy and seemingly prosperous with another woman, a woman he was supposedly pitching to for our future, sent a jolt of ice through my veins. It wasn't just heartbreak anymore, it was a sudden, sickening jolt of suspicion. My mind flashed back to all the excuses, the late nights, the investor dinners, the unexpected setbacks. He'd always sworn he was alone, pouring all his energy into his work. But here he was, clearly thriving, seemingly having no trouble affording expensive suits or fancy lunches, with a woman who was supposedly just a business contact. He wasn't stressed, he wasn't struggling, he wasn't alone. He was living a life I had unknowingly financed, while portraying himself as a desperate entrepreneur to me. The betrayal was so much deeper than I had initially understood. This wasn't just a cruel breakup, this was a calculated, deliberate deception. This was a man who had lied to me, used me, and then discarded me, all while maintaining a facade of struggling genius. The image of him, laughing with Olivia, was the breadcrumb, the first tangible piece of evidence that his entire narrative, the one I had built my life around, was a meticulously crafted fabrication. And the realization, though painful, sparked something cold and fierce within me. My grief started to morph into something else, a simmering, righteous anger. The click had happened, and it was the sound of my eyes finally, brutally, opening. The deeper I dug, the sicker I felt, each discovery a fresh wave of nausea. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a meticulously constructed lie, and I was the unsuspecting mark. That chance sighting of Leo and Olivia was a splinter, and once it was in, I couldn't stop myself from picking at it, digging deeper, even though I knew the pain would be immense. My grief, once a smothering blanket, had now transformed into a cold, clinical determination. I was a graphic designer, yes, but my work required meticulous attention to detail, a keen eye for inconsistencies, and a knack for digital sleuthing. I started where most people do, social media. Leo's public profiles were always impeccably curated, but I remembered a few obscure, older accounts he'd mentioned in passing, ones he thought I'd forgotten about. I found an old Twitter account he hadn't used in years, and buried deep within a stream of mostly mundane posts, there were a few replies to tweets from a woman named Chloe. Nothing overtly romantic, just friendly banter, but the dates were glaring. They stretched back years, long before he and I had met, and continued right up until a few months into our relationship. And then, a jarring discovery, a public photo, dated just 3 months before Leo and I started dating. Of Chloe and Leo on a beach vacation, her arm wrapped around him, a genuine, intimate smile on his face. The caption read, "Best bokeh with my love. Red heart palm tree dot." My stomach churned. He hadn't just moved on quickly, he had been with someone else, or perhaps several someone else's, while he was weaving his elaborate story to me. But the real gut punch came when I started looking into his startup. He had always been cagey about its name, citing NDA reasons or stealth mode. But a few times, usually after a couple of drinks, he'd mumbled something about Innovate Link or Synapse Tech. Using my design connections, I subtly reached out to a few people in the local tech scene, casually mentioning the names, asking if they'd heard of any groundbreaking apps. The answers were consistently vague, or outright negative. Innovate Link? Never heard of it. Synapse Tech? Sounds like a dozen other startups that never got off the ground. A prominent tech journalist I knew, after a few discreet inquiries, told me there was no record of a company with that name, or Leo's name, ever securing significant venture capital in our city. The breakthrough he'd been touting was a phantom. His entire app development story, the one that had consumed my savings and my emotional energy, was a mirage. I dug deeper into online business registries, local startup incubators, anything I could find. Nothing. No official company registration, no listed patents, no significant public presence beyond a skeletal, generic website that looked like it had been thrown together in an hour. The big meetings, the term sheets, the investor pitches, all fiction. My investment had gone nowhere, into nothing. He hadn't been building an empire, he had been building a house of cards, and I had been supplying the cash and the emotional glue. Then came the financial breadcrumbs. I pulled up my bank statements, painful as it was to revisit the endless transfers to Leo or Leo's business. I cross-referenced them with the timelines of his setbacks. Every significant transfer of money from my account correlated directly with a new server cost, a software subscription, a rent for his co-working space. But there was no co-working space registered under his name or any of his phantom company names. And the server costs? They were laughably inflated for a concept that seemingly had no users. A part of me, the part still clinging to a shred of the man I thought I knew, wanted to believe he was just incredibly incompetent, a failed entrepreneur. But the cold, hard evidence pointed to something far more sinister, deliberate, calculated fraud. He wasn't struggling, he was leeching. He wasn't ambitious, he was a parasite, feeding off my trust, my love, my financial stability. He had drained me, financially and emotionally, not for a grand vision, but for his own comfort, his own convenience, his own secret life. The nausea was overwhelming. This wasn't just a breakup, it was a profound violation. I felt utterly foolish, sickened by my own naivete. The perfect, charming man I had fallen in love with was nothing more than a meticulously crafted illusion, a con artist who had played me for a fool. And the realization, though devastating, also brought with it a chilling clarity. The anger, once a simmering ember, now roared to life, a furious inferno threatening to consume everything in its path. But this time, it wasn't directed inward. This time, it had a target. The truth hit me like a physical blow, stripping away every last shred of my former self, leaving only raw, exposed nerves. And in its place, a scorching fire ignited. The financial revelations, though painful, were just the tip of the iceberg. I knew I needed to dig deeper, to understand the full extent of the psychological warfare he had waged. My instincts, once so easily dismissed by Leo, were now screaming. I remembered a fleeting conversation I'd overheard him having on the phone one day, months ago, where he mentioned Uncle Richard and a family legacy. He had quickly covered it up, saying it was just a distant relative he rarely spoke to. But my memory clung to names, to snippets. I started with Richard and Vance, thinking of Olivia Vance, the VC. A few more hours of digging online led me to a LinkedIn profile for a Richard Vance, a high-level executive at a major tech firm, and a prominent philanthropist. His listed family members included a daughter, Olivia Vance, and a nephew, Leo Maxwell. Maxwell. Not Leo, just Leo. Leo Maxwell. The pieces slammed together with a sickening thud. Leo wasn't a struggling, independent app developer, he was connected, privileged, and clearly didn't need my money. His family legacy wasn't some humble start, it was a direct pipeline to the kind of resources most entrepreneurs could only dream of. The entire narrative of him being a self-made man fighting against the odds was a complete fabrication. He came from wealth, from influence. He was simply playing a game, and I was the pawn. I found myself at Mia's door late that night, a stack of printouts clutched in my trembling hands, my face probably a ghostly shade of white. She took one look at me and pulled me inside, no questions asked. I laid everything out on her coffee table, the bank statements, the fake company registrations, the old social media posts, the LinkedIn profiles. As I spoke, the full weight of it descended upon me, a suffocating, unbearable pressure. The tears finally came, hot and furious, a torrent of shame, rage, and profound disbelief. He wasn't struggling, Mia, I choked out, my voice raw. He was mocking me. He was laughing at me behind my back, probably with Olivia, probably with his family, while I was working myself to the bone, pouring every last cent into his fantasy. The thought of him and Olivia, the esteemed venture capitalist, sitting across a table, perhaps sharing a private chuckle about the gullible designer funding Leo's escapades, made me physically ill. He hadn't just been unfaithful, he had been parasitic, a predator disguised as a partner. He had orchestrated this entire charade, not out of necessity, but out of a deep-seated contempt, a sick pleasure in manipulating and exploiting someone who loved him unconditionally. Mia listened, her face growing grimmer with each piece of evidence, her anger mirroring my own. Liam joined us, equally appalled. They both affirmed what I now knew in my bones: this was not my fault. I was not stupid. I was a victim of a master manipulator. That validation, simple as it was, began to mend a microscopic tear in my shattered self-worth. The emotional blow of discovering he wasn't just broke but rich and using me anyway, was almost harder to bear than the public breakup itself. It meant his declarations of love, his promises of a shared future, his desperate pleas for financial help, every single word had been a lie. He hadn't been weak, he had been cruel. He hadn't been lost, he had been calculating. He had not only broken my heart but meticulously dismantled my sense of reality, my trust in my own judgment. But amidst the overwhelming agony, something new began to stir. A cold, hard resolve. A fire, not of despair, but of righteous fury, ignited deep within my core. I wasn't just a heartbroken woman anymore. I was a woman who had been wronged, profoundly and maliciously. And I refused to let him get away with it. The tears dried, replaced by a steely glint in my eyes. The fear dissipated, replaced by a burning desire for justice, not just for me, but for the principle of it. I would not be his victim. I would not be silenced. I would reclaim my dignity, even if it meant tearing down the meticulously constructed facade of his privileged life. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I was about to serve a 5-course meal, garnished with undeniable truth. The realization that Leo's entire persona was a carefully constructed sham, a financial and emotional con, hardened something in me. The initial wave of shame and self-pity began to recede, replaced by a cold, unwavering determination. I wasn't just angry, I was strategically furious. I knew I couldn't just stew in my pain, I had to act. And I had to act smartly. My first step was practical, securing my own financial future. I froze my credit cards, changed all my passwords, and alerted my bank to potential fraud. It was a tedious, humiliating process, admitting how deeply I'd been compromised, but it was necessary. I then took all the evidence I had meticulously gathered, the printouts of his fake company website, the bank statements detailing the significant transfers, the social media posts, the LinkedIn profiles, the texts where he begged for money for his startup, and compiled them into a coherent, undeniable timeline. My graphic design skills, once used to create beautiful things, were now channeled into building a devastatingly effective case. I created visual charts of the money flow, annotated screenshots, and laid out his web of lies in a format that was both easy to understand and impossible to refute. It was a dossier of deception. I didn't immediately run to a lawyer. My goal wasn't just legal recourse, though that was an option. My primary goal was justice in the truest sense, exposing him, reclaiming my narrative, and allowing others to see the true nature of the man who had so effortlessly charmed and exploited me. I knew the best way to do that was to hit him where it hurt most, his reputation, his carefully cultivated image, the very foundation of his privileged existence. I consulted with Mia and Liam, my unwavering pillars of support. Mia, ever the pragmatist, helped me refine my strategy, brainstorming ways to maximize impact. Liam, with his sharp legal mind, though not a practicing lawyer, he understood the nuances, helped me ensure every piece of evidence was airtight and ethically obtained. We brainstormed scenarios, discussed potential reactions, and planned for every contingency. It felt like preparing for a high-stakes chess match, and for the first time in months, I felt a surge of energy, a sense of purpose beyond just surviving. I also started rebuilding myself, not just as a means to an end, but because I knew I needed to be strong, mentally and emotionally, for what was coming. I started exercising again, something I'd abandoned during the height of my exhaustion. I went back to therapy, not to wallow in my victimhood, but to process the trauma and build resilience. I rediscovered my passion for personal art projects, sketching and painting late into the night, channeling my anger and pain into creative outlets. Each brushstroke felt like a small act of defiance, a quiet declaration that he hadn't broken me. I got a new haircut, a sharp, purposeful bob that felt like a shedding of the old, naive Elara. I bought myself a new outfit, not for anyone else, but for me, something that made me feel powerful and put together. This wasn't about seeking revenge in a petty sense, it was about reclaiming my power, my self-respect, and my voice. It was about turning a profound violation into a catalyst for my own fierce transformation. And I was ready. The game was on. His charming mask didn't just shatter, it exploded, revealing the pathetic, terrified boy beneath. And for the first time in years, I felt truly, exhilaratingly free. The opportunity presented itself sooner than I expected. The local tech scene, small as it was, often had networking events. I saw an invitation for a prominent charity gala co-hosted by Richard Vance, Leo's uncle, with Olivia Vance also listed as a key organizer. And, predictably, Leo Maxwell was listed among the rising stars to watch. This was it. The perfect stage for a public, undeniable confrontation. I knew it would be terrifying, but the thought of letting him continue his charade, preying on other unsuspecting individuals, was far more terrifying. I spent days perfecting my strategy, reviewing my evidence, practicing my composure. Mia and Liam would be there, my silent allies, ready to offer support. The night of the gala arrived. I walked in, not in the old, faded dresses I used to wear, but in a sleek, tailored navy blue jumpsuit that exuded quiet confidence, a silent armor. My new haircut framed my face sharply, and my eyes, though still carrying the ghost of pain, held a new, steely resolve. I moved through the room, making small talk, observing. It wasn't long before I spotted him. Leo, radiant as ever, schmoozing with a group of investors, Olivia Vance laughing brightly by his side. He looked the part of the successful entrepreneur, the golden boy, utterly oblivious. He hadn't seen me yet. I took a deep breath, clutching the small, elegant clutch that contained the most damning pieces of evidence, carefully selected and printed for maximum impact. I waited for the opportune moment, when the conversation lulled, and a few more key people had gathered around his cluster. Then, I approached. "Leo," I said, my voice clear and steady, devoid of any emotion, "it's been a while." He turned, his smile frozen on his face as he recognized me. His eyes widened, a flicker of raw panic darting through them. Olivia, seeing his reaction, looked at me with a questioning glance. The small crowd around him turned their attention to us, sensing the sudden, palpable shift in the air. "Elara," he stammered, his usual smooth composure deserting him utterly. What are you doing here?" "Oh, just enjoying the evening," I replied, my voice dangerously calm, a predator's purr. "Though I couldn't help but notice you're still pitching that revolutionary app of yours." "Still raising capital, I see." His face went ashen. Olivia, sensing the escalating tension, stepped forward. "Do I know you?" she asked, her voice polite but firm. "Not directly," I said, meeting her gaze directly, holding it. "But you know Leo. And I know a great deal about his startup." I paused, letting the words hang, dripping with unspoken accusations. "It's fascinating, really. All those months I invested in his vision, all those long nights I worked to keep us afloat, all the money I poured into his server costs and software subscriptions. It seems my investment has allowed him to acquire quite the impressive new wardrobe, and perhaps afford a few luxurious dates." His jaw dropped, a grotesque tableau of shock. A few murmurs rippled through the small crowd. Leo tried to interject. "Elara, don't be ridiculous. This isn't the time or place." "Oh, but it is, Leo," I said, my voice rising slightly, but still controlled, each word a hammer blow. "Because the truth deserves a stage. The truth is, Leo Maxwell isn't a struggling entrepreneur, he's a professional con artist. His app is a fiction, his struggles were a carefully crafted lie to extract money from me, and presumably, from others. He wasn't building a startup, he was building a lifestyle off my hard-earned savings. And then, when I had nothing left, he publicly discarded me, right in front of our friends, on my birthday." I pulled out the first carefully selected piece of evidence from my clutch, a printout of the fake company registration document, highlighted with notes. This company never existed beyond a few hours of design work. "And this," I continued, pulling out a screenshot of his personal bank statement, obtained from an old shared cloud account he'd forgotten about, "is where my money actually went. Not to servers, not to software, but to designer watches, lavish dinners, and trips he took with someone who definitely wasn't me, while telling me he was working tirelessly." I made sure to meet Olivia's eyes. Her expression, which had been polite confusion, slowly morphed into one of dawning horror, then pure, cold fury. The whispers grew louder, morphing into hushed gasps. Leo, for the first time, looked utterly exposed, utterly terrified. He tried to grab my arm again, his hand shaking. "Elara, stop. You're making a scene." "A scene?" I retorted, pulling my arm away with a jerk, my voice resonating with cold authority. "You made a scene on my birthday, Leo. You publicly humiliated me. This is merely a reclamation of my dignity." His face was flushed, blotchy, his eyes darting frantically around the room, desperately trying to find an escape, a hole to crawl into. The charming mask was utterly gone, replaced by a desperate, panicked grimace. He was cornered, stripped bare, and utterly, pathetically exposed. And in that moment, seeing the abject fear in his eyes, the utter destruction of his carefully constructed persona, a profound sense of calm washed over me. It wasn't the volatile catharsis of vengeance, it was the quiet, powerful piece of truth finally being revealed. I had spoken my truth, loud and clear, and in doing so, I had taken back my power. The public shame that had suffocated me for months finally lifted, replaced by a liberating sense of vindication. I hadn't just exposed him, I had freed myself. The silence after the storm was deafening, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the sound of my own breath, strong and steady, a new rhythm of self. The aftermath of the gala was a whirlwind. News travels fast in the tight-knit world of tech and social circles. Within hours, the story, albeit a slightly embellished version, had spread like wildfire. Leo Maxwell, the golden boy, the rising star, was suddenly branded a con artist, a manipulator, a fraud. Olivia Vance, apparently shocked and embarrassed by the public exposure of her nephew's deceit, and his implied relationship with her while he was with me, immediately issued a scathing statement distancing herself and her firm from him, citing unprofessional conduct and gross misrepresentation. His LinkedIn profile, once gleaming with fabricated accolades, mysteriously disappeared. His phantom company website vanished. The immediate fallout was swift and decisive. He had been publicly shamed, his carefully constructed reputation shattered beyond repair. It wasn't the kind of revenge that landed him in jail, though I considered legal action. I ultimately decided my peace was more important than a protracted legal battle, but it was a deeply satisfying form of justice. He had lost the one thing he truly valued: his image, his access to privilege, his ability to manipulate others with impunity. For me, the days and weeks that followed were a period of intense, yet necessary, healing. The initial adrenaline rush of the confrontation slowly faded, replaced by a profound weariness. I had been running on fumes of anger and indignation for months, and now that the battle was over, the emotional exhaustion settled in. But it was a different kind of exhaustion than before, not the draining fatigue of being controlled, but the honest exhaustion of someone who had fought a hard fight and won. My friends, Mia and Liam, were incredible. They rallied around me, not just with comfort, but with practical support. Mia helped me navigate the awkward questions from mutual acquaintances, framing my narrative clearly and concisely. Liam helped me review my finances, ensuring I had taken all necessary steps to prevent future exploitation and begin the process of rebuilding. Slowly, painstakingly, I started to put the pieces of my life back together. I found a new, cozy apartment, a clean slate. I invested in myself, enrolling in an advanced design course that I had always dreamed of taking but had put off for Leo's needs. I started therapy again, this time with a clearer focus on processing the trauma, rebuilding my self-worth, and learning to trust my intuition again. It was a slow, arduous process, filled with moments of doubt and relapse, moments where the old shame threatened to resurface. But each time, I reminded myself of the strength I had found, the voice I had reclaimed. I allowed myself to feel the grief, the anger, the pain, but I refused to let it consume me. I was no longer a victim, I was a survivor, a warrior, forged in the fires of betrayal. The lessons were brutal, but undeniable. Trust your gut, value your worth, and never, ever allow someone else to define your reality. The process of reclaiming my financial independence, of setting clear boundaries, of prioritizing my own well-being, was liberating. I was rediscovering myself, not the Elara Leo had tried to mold, but the authentic, resilient woman who had always been there, just waiting to be set free. The path forward was clear, and for the first time in a long time, I was walking it on my own terms. I wasn't just surviving, I was flourishing. And the girl who had once lost everything had found something far more valuable, herself. It's been almost 2 years since that fateful night at the Gala, and looking back, it feels like a different lifetime, a past lived by someone else. The raw edges of betrayal have smoothed, replaced by the quiet strength of resilience. Like a kintsugi pot, more beautiful for its mended cracks. My apartment is filled with sunlight and the vibrant colors of my own artwork, a stark contrast to the sterile, anxious space I inhabited during my time with Leo. My career has soared. The advanced design course ignited a new passion for interactive UI/UX design, leading to exciting new opportunities. I'm no longer just a freelance graphic designer, I'm a creative director at a thriving tech firm, a role that constantly challenges and inspires me. The irony isn't lost on me, I found my true professional calling in the very industry Leo pretended to conquer. But this time, it's real, it's earned, and it's built on a foundation of integrity, not deception. My friendships with Mia and Liam are stronger than ever, forged in the crucible of shared adversity. They're my chosen family, my unwavering support system, and our laughter fills my home on countless evenings. We often talk about Leo, not with bitterness, but with a sense of detached amusement, marveling at the sheer audacity of his charade. Occasionally, a mutual acquaintance will mention seeing him, always with a hint of awkwardness. His reputation is irrevocably damaged, he's a pariah in local tech circles, forced to operate on the fringes, unable to escape the shadow of his past actions. It's not the kind of justice you see in movies, but it's profoundly effective. He exists, but his power to harm me, or others, has been significantly diminished. Romance? Well, that's a more delicate chapter. I've dated, cautiously, with a much clearer understanding of my boundaries and a finely tuned radar for red flags. There's someone new, actually. His name is Alex. He's kind, genuinely thoughtful, and understands the meaning of mutual support. He's patient, respects my space, and celebrates my independence. There's no grandiosity, no manipulative charm, just a quiet, consistent presence that feels incredibly safe. We're taking things slow, building something real, brick by honest brick. And for the first time, I don't feel the need to rush, to define, to cling. I know what I deserve, and I'm confident enough to wait for it. The journey from the vulnerable, naive Elara who fell for Leo's lies to the strong, empowered woman I am today was arduous, marked by immense pain and profound self-doubt. But every tear, every moment of confusion, every humiliating realization was a necessary step on this path. I learned the hard way that love is not about sacrifice without reciprocity, that trust must be earned, and that true strength lies not in enduring abuse, but in recognizing it and having the courage to walk away, to expose, and to reclaim what was lost. I no longer fear being alone, because I've learned to truly love and value myself. The emotional scars remain, subtle reminders of a battle fought and won, but they don't define me. They are simply part of my story, a testament to my resilience, etched not in sorrow, but in hard-won wisdom. I am not a victim. I am a survivor. I am strong. I am whole. I am free. And that, in itself, is the greatest victory of all, a silent roar echoing through the silence he left behind.